Today I decided to give you guys a ranking of the Mortal Kombat games. This is a series of games that started in 1992 and has pretty much been ongoing until the current day. There's 16 games on my ranking, and I'm only going to leave out a few, such as the mobile ones and ones that are redundant, like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and Mortal Kombat 3. I'll just choose Ultimate because there's no point putting both of them on here. So, without further ado, I decided let's get started. Starting with Special Forces and Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero. Mythology Sub-Zero is essentially just a really bad 2.5D side-scroller. As for Special Forces, it's just a game where you play as Jax and go around fighting bad guys, but it's honestly pretty lame. Neither game plays well, and both of them pretty much gave me nothing. It's the only ones that I've never really owned. I have rented them in the past, back when rentals were still a thing, but they're just not that good. Don't really like either, and so they pretty much tie for last place. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe. This is just a watered-down game. The T rating really doesn't help, and I don't know why they couldn't just have an M-rated game where the Mortal Kombat characters fight the DC characters. I don't think the game is bad, it's just really lackluster, and I think there's much better games out there. The action is okay. Some of the finishers and moves like the falling attack are kind of fun, but it's just a watered down experience. This is also technically Mortal Kombat 8 chronologically, but it doesn't really fit into the timeline at all, and many people don't even consider it a Part 8 and don't think Part 8 even exists, but I guess that's what NetherRealm's going with. A lackluster game that I don't recommend at all. Up next, we have the original Mortal Kombat. Every game from this point forward I actually rather like, and I think the original Mortal Kombat was really fun for what it is. However, the game is just a bit stiff by modern standards. It has a very limited roster, and while I do respect it for starting the franchise, it is very dated and not one of the better ones. Still a fun 90s experience, but just don't expect to be blown away with this one. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. This one is actually fun, is one of the more polished of the 3D Mortal Kombat games, meaning the ones where you can move around in circles and not just face each other. The problem with this one, though, is the roster feels a little limited. I think the story is a bit uninspired. Not a bad game, but kind of middle of the road. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat 4. I actually rather like Mortal Kombat 4. It's kind of like the janky first 3D entry, and it's rather fun. It was released on the N64 and PlayStation as well as arcade. Overall, it's a fun and entertaining first attempt at a 3D Mortal Kombat game, and one that does hold a special place in my heart despite its jankiness. Definitely recommend this one. Up next, we have Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. This one is very much liked by the fan base, and I do enjoy it as well, but it just feels a little bit redundant of 2. I like some of the characters, and I enjoy the look of this game, but I think that it's not quite as polished as it could have been. And by the time you got to the third game, I expected a little bit more. Still very fun, but not one of my favorites of the franchise. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat Trilogy. I really enjoy this one because it more or less just takes aspects of the first 3 games and throws them all into one. But much like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, it feels a little bit been there, done that at this point. By the time I first played this game, I already played the original trilogy, and it kind of felt just like a retread. A really fun greatest hits, but if you played the first 3, prepare to be a little bit disappointed, but also still fun. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat X. I really like Mortal Kombat X and think it was a good continuation from Mortal Kombat 9, but I felt the story was kind of lacking in this one. It's essentially a retelling of Mortal Kombat 4, really roughly, with Shinnok being the villain again. And while I do like the cinematic approach to this one, and I like playing as like Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs, and while it's fun to see the original OG characters have their own kids who join the tournament, this one just feels a little bit lacking in story. The gameplay is good and it's right on par with Part 9, but of the new 2.5D Mortal Kombat games, it has to be my least favorite. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat Armageddon. This one is actually pretty damn fun, and I really like that it has a massive roster, the biggest roster of any Mortal Kombat game. But the biggest problem with this one is the simple fact that it's a little bit simplified from Deception. Deception basically had 3 different fighting styles and was really smooth in his gameplay, but had a kind of a medium-sized roster, not a bad one. But by the time you get to Armageddon, they do improve the roster, but they also take away one of the fighting styles, knocking it down from 3 to 2, and there's really no finishers in this game. There's a new mode where you get to create your own finisher, but all it does is basically let you tack on limbs to rip off, and it just feels kind of lazy. The creators of the series even admitted they were kind of running out of steam at this point, and it kind of shows. Really fun for two-player experience just for the large roster, but a bit lacking in the gameplay department. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat 1. I do rather enjoy this game a lot, and I think the story is actually an improvement over 10 and 11. I actually think this was more or less a retelling of Armageddon with Deadly Alliance thrown in. There's even 2 chapters in this game called Deadly Alliance and Armageddon. But I really think that this is a unique reset of the timeline. Much like 9 reset the timeline, this one does it again in an interesting way. I actually played this one on the Switch, and while that definitely is the weakest version of the game, it actually has been improved where it does run relatively well on the Switch, minus a few graphical hiccups. But no matter what system you own, you'll have fun with this one, and I think it's one of the best stories ever told in a Mortal Kombat game, and just like the other ones, it has a fun multiplayer mode. But the only downside of this one is they kind of took away the crypt, which was really disappointing. But for that great story, I had to rank it this high, and I do really enjoy this one. Up next, I'm going to have to go with Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. This one is not really a fighting game, and I debated putting it on the list, but it's a really fun action beat-em-up that does still have a fighting mode in it that's pretty fun. The only problem that I have with this one is that the story's a little bit redundant. It's kind of just like a retelling of Mortal Kombat 2, and I actually rather enjoy that, but there's nothing really surprising in terms of story. But it's just really fun to play as Kung Lao and Liu Kang as you team up and fight Shao Kahn and other villains from Outworld in this really badass 3D adventure, and the best non-fighting game in the Mortal Kombat series. Up next, we have Mortal Kombat 11. This one is great, and I really do enjoy the Aftermath storyline more than the main storyline. The only downside to this one, though, is the gameplay was getting a little redundant at this point. It did 9, 10, 11, and even 1 all feel very similar. And by the time you get to this one, there's not a whole lot new, but what really pushes this one on top is the bonus characters. I loved playing as Rambo, as well as RoboCop, and even the Terminator. Spawn was great. It's definitely the best guest roster I think they've ever had. I also love the crypt in this one. Letting you walk around in 3D was really fun, and it's definitely the best crypt I think that they've done so far. Very enjoyable and one of the best Mortal Kombat games. Up next, it has to be Mortal Kombat 2. My favorite of the original 2D Mortal Kombat games. This one was just everything the first and third game should have been. 2 really just feels fast-paced and fun. I love fighting your way through the tournament and getting to Shao Kahn, who's just a much better villain than Shang Tsung in my opinion. And I just think this is the best of the classic Mortal Kombat games. Really entertaining and one of the best games that I've even played in the fighting genre. Up next is the best of the 2.5D Mortal Kombat games, and that is Mortal Kombat 9, also known as just Mortal Kombat. This game was great. The story was essentially a retelling of 1, 2, and 3 after Raiden resets the timeline after the events of Armageddon. I really do love the story this time around. I love the over-the-top gore, but overall, everything about this game is great, from the graphics to the story to the retelling of the original 3 games. It's just the complete package with just better gameplay. I love Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, as well as the first one to a lesser extent, and this basically is the definitive version of those 3 games. It's fantastic. But my number 1 pick would have to be Mortal Kombat Deception. Deception is just great. It is my favorite of the 3D Mortal Kombat games, and it's my favorite Mortal Kombat game in general. The reason why this one I think is the best is it has the best gameplay of the 3D type. I don't think the gameplay is quite as good as Mortal Kombat 9, but it's really close. But what really sets this one over the top for me is the Conquest mode. You play as a character named Shujinko in this full-blown RPG/fighting game hybrid, and it is just magnificent. There's never been this kind of depth to the story mode in any other Mortal Kombat game, not even close, and I just adore the Conquest mode. The crypt is also really fun. It's not as complex as 11, but it's cool to, unlock all the gravestones and everything. That's really cool. There's even just a great character roster in this game. While not as big as Armageddon, all the great ones are here. Everything about the game is just perfect to me. And it's my favorite Mortal Kombat game. I just love the atmosphere and the feel of this one. It may not be the most popular one, but it's my favorite, and it holds a very special place in my heart. Mortal Kombat Deception. Check it out. Well, that's my list. I thank you all for watching. I'm sorry this video's been out a little bit later than I would have liked, but working a lot and hanging out with family and stuff like that. But I thank you for your patience. If you'd like, leave your list down below, or just tell me your favorite Mortal Kombat game, and let me know if you agree or disagree with my list. This was a fun one to make, and I thank you all for watching, and peace out.